Thank you. Let's be seated, please. Let me get this right. Program Director, Professor Nick Benedel, former President Kgalema Motlanthe, ambassadors who are here, and the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches. I did not see Mfundisi, but I'm sure he's here. Is he here? There he is. Isitwalandwe of Foundation, Baba Mlangeni, the trustees of the Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation. Roger, thank you very much for welcoming me and us here. Colleagues from government, colleagues from business, civil society and academia, and ladies and gentlemen. What former President Kgalema Motlanthe does not tell you is that upon signing on as an official in the National Union of Mine Workers, soon thereafter, Kosatu House was bombed. And I kept wondering whether he had brought a bomb from Robben Island. I've been honored with this Drakensberg Choir CD, which I'm going to listen to. For me, it's been something that I've looked forward to come and see these young boys singing. I've often seen them on television. And today I had the privilege of being able to listen to another version of the national anthem, a wonderful version. Now, you could say there could be another version, which I've never really listened to. So we have the normal version that we all sing, as we will do tomorrow on Youth Day at the Orlando Stadium when I will speak there. And then there was the Drakensberg Choir version. And someone who's a comedian once spoke about a possible version that I've never heard. I don't know whether he had heard it, but he just imagined. There could be another version that could be sung by the Ladysmith Black Mambazo. That if they were to sing theirs, you probably take an hour listening to the national anthem, because they would elongate certain verses. They would go, Nkosi sigelela, we sigelele, we sigelele Africa. And they would add, Ungayegi, we sigelele Africa. And they would go on and on. So that is the version that I'll probably listen to one day. I'm really delighted to be here, and would like to applaud Comrade Kgalema Motlanthe for this initiative, together with the trustees, but more importantly, applaud Comrade Kgalema Motlanthe for having set up this foundation with the able assistance of my sister Gugu, and obviously the trustees, and that the centerpiece of what they do is to engage the nation in dialogue. This is something that Comrade Kgalema has excelled in. Even as he came out of prison, was in the NUM, he was a person who was known for wanting to get people to dialogue. And I was delighted when he was given the task of heading the high-level panel, where he was appointed by Parliament, and they've now come up with a wonderful report. And in that task, they engaged in a thoroughgoing dialogue with our people right across the breadth and the length of our country. And this initiative is an added piece of what he does well. So I applaud him, and I wish them very well in everything. And it's wonderful also to Comrade Kgalema to have brought together a cross-section, a wide cross-section of South Africans like this. This, I would say, is quite historic, particularly in this day and age, an age where our country is looking forward to a pathway to a particular future. And I'm glad that there are so many of you who are here who have come to participate in this type of dialogue as we try to find this pathway, this way to a great future for our country. And I guess you are gathered here to imagine another South Africa, a South Africa that is renewed, a South Africa that we all yearn for. And we've come from all corners of our land, in my view, to reimagine a renewed South Africa, a South Africa that is truly free, fundamentally equal, wonderfully prosperous, and breathtakingly joyful. And that is the South Africa of our dreams. That's the one we want. If we are to liberate ourselves from the shackles of the past, as well as the troubles of the present, and there are many troubles that our country is going through right now, which troubles I would urge you to spend time debating, discussing, and finding solutions for. But as we do so, we must be prepared to dream about a shared future for all our people. We must see in our mind's eye a landscape of our country that is transformed and a people who are enriched and empowered in many ways. We must see the roads that brought us here. Sorry, I flew by helicopter. You might have come by road, sorry. But the roads that brought us here, the roads that wind through the foothills of the Drakensberg, we must see those as arteries and pathways of commerce, of knowledge, and experience. These pathways and arteries must take us to homesteads that have the land and the means to both produce food and to generate a living. They must also take us to schools that are as good as any you will find in the country, like the Drakensberg schoolboys who go to a wonderful school. They should take us, these pathways should take us to centers of excellence where educators are dedicated and learners are eager to acquire knowledge and skills. These arteries that we have traversed coming here must also take us past clinics and hospitals that have the medicine, the equipment and staff that our people need to care for their ailments. They must take us to a country where we have reshaped our country to have universal health coverage for all. We imagine these areas as places where young people will find opportunities to thrive, where they will stay and raise their own families. We should see, as we take these pathways, cities that are growing, but cities that do not exclude, but cities that include our people in their spatial architecture. Vacant land near the centers of cities and towns should be turned into affordable housing for the poor and the working class. Close to shops and parks schools, clinics, public transport, and places of work. This is where these pathways must take us to. They must also take us to a place where children are safe and where they are valued and where they are nurtured. From the day they are born, they should be nourished, stimulated, educated, and challenged. They should be taught that men and women are equal, that none may claim dominion over another, and that all must have the same opportunities to learn, to work, to earn, and to raise a family. We imagine a country where no one is afraid to walk the streets at night, where families sleep peacefully and all pay tax, knowing that their hard-earned money will be well spent and properly accounted for. These pathways must take us to a country that we imagine, that is integrally and enthusiastically part of the great African continent, as comfortable with immigrants from other countries as we are able to feel when we visit their countries to trade, to invest, to learn, to work, and to settle. We should see a country through these pathways, a country that has embraced the benefits of technology, artificial intelligence, and have done so for the growth of our economy, social development, and for more effective governance. The pathways must show a path where we are producers of knowledge and drivers of technological progress. Now, we've gathered here in the Drakensberg not only to imagine the South Africa we want, but to make firm our commitment and conviction that such a country, yes, is possible. We dream today as our forebears dreamt when they wrote the Freedom Charter. They knew then that what they imagined, a South Africa that belongs to all who live in it, was not a pipe dream, but was a dream that could be achieved and a dream that could be in their grasp. They grasped a living dream. Boy, did that dream fire up generations of South Africans. And that dream that they crafted in the Freedom Charter did fire us up. It was a dream that drove us to achieve the South Africa that we imagine for our future. They were not daunted by the obstacles they faced, nor were they intimidated by the forces that tried with such ferocity to deny them their dream. The inclusive society that we seek is similarly within our reach. And this weekend, I would urge that we should spend time and make every effort to discuss this inclusive society, as Comrade Kgalema Motlanthe was saying. We know that it can be achieved not only because we have together managed to defeat an iniquitous and inhuman system, but because we have already made such progress, great progress together in building such a society. Our democracy will soon be 25 years old. In the broad sweep of human history, it is just but a moment. But for nearly half our population, these 25 years are a lifetime. Soon there will be as many South Africans born in a democratic South Africa as there are born under apartheid. And yet, through these young people, although these young people did not live under apartheid, for most of their lives they've had to live with its legacy. That is why this forum is so important. This weekend's discussions and exchanges that you are going to have are so important, but they are also so timely. For the discussions you are going to have provide an opportunity not only to imagine a South Africa that has freed itself from the divided past, but also to consider what actually needs to be done to realize the dream we all have of an inclusive society. And I guess what we should spend time doing is to define what this inclusive society is. And I'll throw some thoughts at you to see whether those thoughts do help us to connect the dots, to begin to define what that inclusive society should be. The South Africa we dream of will not be achieved without hard work and concerted common effort by all of us. It will not be achieved without appropriate policy choices, effective planning, clear evidence, so that everything that we do should be evidence-based, so that we don't resort to populism, we don't resort to slogans, but we do everything on an evidence-based. We should have sound data, and everything should be underpinned by broad collaboration. And this Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation becomes one of the building blocks that we have in our nation that can help us to deepen that collaboration. It will not be achieved without political will. It will also, this South Africa that we imagine, will also not be achieved without courageous leadership and the mobilization of all social forces behind an ambitious program of economic and social transformation. The recent 2018 World Bank Group Systematic Country Diagnostic for South Africa explores key developmental challenges and opportunities for South Africa. It has identified a number of binding constraints to tackling poverty and inequality that still grips our country. They have identified 5. I'll talk to only 3. That report notes that the root causes of persistently high poverty, continuing inequality and unemployment in our country are linked to South Africa's history of exclusion, which continues to be entrenched in a number of areas that they identify. And they identify those areas as being land, capital, labor, productive markets, and they say despite progress that we have made since the dawn of democracy, these areas still keep us back and hold us back from exploding into a more inclusive society. The bank places special emphasis to the need for large-scale job creation. The diagnostic also says that while South Africa underwent a successful and peaceful political transition in 1994, too many South Africans remain excluded from participating in the economy, rendering the transition incomplete. And that is the title of their report. They call it an incomplete transition. And they continue that the persistent legacy of exclusion makes it difficult to build the post-apartheid social contract. And they use terms that we have flighted in the public discourse: social compact, social contract, and we need to get to grips with that, because they talk to this collaboration that we are seeking to build. The diagnostic also identifies key binding constraints that reflect the root causes in tackling poverty. They deal with insufficient skills as one of the binding constraints, which takes us back to our very, very sad past, where apartheid or Bantu education really damaged the prospects of our country, and we continue to experience the legacy of such, and I'll talk about that in a minute. They also identify skewed distribution of land, here, here, here. Roger spoke about it as well, but he speaks about it wonderfully. He talks about those carvings that were done by our forebears, the San and the Khoi. It is the World Bank that is saying the issue of land has to be addressed. The bank suggests that reforms that can strengthen the asset base of the poor while also increasing property security for investors is important. They also talk about another constraint, which is low competition and low integration in global and regional value chains, and also talk about climate change challenges, water usage, and spatial architecture. While this initiative that the Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation has come up with will deliberate on some of these issues and many more over the course of the weekend, there are 4 areas which I want to highlight as being critical for the achievement of inclusive growth and a more equal society. And these 4 are by no means the only ones. There are those that come to mind which are important, which I want to be working on in government, of course, also as identified by the governing party. The first one for me is institutions. The next one is assets. Human capabilities is the next, and gender relations is the fourth. As we have had to confront the reality of state capture, we've been forced to appreciate once more the vital importance of democratic institutions in ensuring stability and protecting against the abuse of power, but more importantly, the theft of public resources. One of the great achievements of our young democracy has been the establishment of durable institutions. Durable, and many of them may not function as well as we want them to, but the fact that we have established them and they are durable and they are rooted on a firm foundation, which is our Constitution, is a great achievement. They also derive their collective mandate from our Constitution, but more particularly, their mandate is to protect vulnerable South Africans. The process of state capture, with all its attendant political, legal, and economic consequences, has eroded the capabilities of several institutions and undermined public confidence and trust in their ability to promote their interests. We have begun the task of restoring the integrity as well as the credibility of several institutions to ensure that they are able, indeed, to effectively fulfill their mandate without undue interference. We depend on these institutions to mediate the distribution of power as well as resources across society in a manner that is fair, progressive, but more importantly, that is based on the law. We depend on them to prevent the rapacious extraction of our national resources by a powerful elite, whether in government or in business, to enrich themselves at the expense of the masses. A common element in many of the conflicts that continue to plague our continent, in particular, is the absence of capable institutions that are able to mediate the unbridled competition that the elite often get into for resources. We have seen this phenomenon on a smaller scale in South Africa, where governance has been eroded and service provision disrupted in several municipalities and provincial departments due to corruption, also due to mismanagement and fearsome political contestation. The achievement of an inclusive society requires institutions that are not only credible and capable, but institutions that are also equipped to enable and facilitate transformation. We seek a state that is both capable and developmental, as clearly articulated in the National Development Plan. For as long as institutions that we have to facilitate land reform are unable to process the thousands of claims brought by poor and rural communities, then we will not be able to achieve an inclusive society. I'll give you a very good, simple example. Some 4 or 5 months ago, I traveled here in KZN, and a community at a church service says to me, "President, we claimed our land through the restitution process, and we did so 7 years ago. Our land, as the Mkhwanazi community, we were told has been cleared for return back to us. Where we sit now, we still do not have our land. We can see our land across the river, and we want our land, but we are told that all it requires is a signature. Can you provide that signature?" they asked me. And I do the usual bureaucratic duck and dive. I said, "No, it's not possible," and all that. And I go back to the union buildings, and I ask, what is happening with the Mkhwanazi restitution claim? I find that it's been lying fallow for almost 7 years, been completely disregarded. People are not taking action on it. And I said, I want this to be done within 6 weeks. 6 weeks, I'd like it to be addressed, because we have a community of thousands of people who are waiting for their land, because the land is an asset to them. They want it back, and they want to work the land. Now, these are some of the problems and the challenges that we face in institutions. Institutions that are meant to work for our people do not do so as our people expect. And in the end, our people lose credibility and trust in these institutions. When hospitals run short of medicine, when housing projects remain unfinished, when schools run out of books, we know that our institutions are failing our people. And I want that to come to an end. That must end. And when our government operates as though it is a federal state rather than a unitary one, where the center should hold and determine the course of governance, then the dream of having a capable state will evaporate. This explains our determination to confront the challenges of governance across the public sector, from state-owned enterprises to municipalities, from our law enforcement agencies to our frontline delivery departments. South Africa must return back to work, and state institutions must serve the interests of our people and not the interests of the elite. And this is the work that must proceed with great urgency. But it must at the same time be thorough and meaningful. One of our Lekgotla discussions is going to be around the issue of governance, because we have seen how governance is just collapsing. We cannot be proud if a whole province's government systems are going to so collapse as to lead our people into the streets protesting about sewage that is just spilling in their streets, where our people protest about garbage that goes uncollected, where our people protest about houses that have not been built, where foundations have just been put up and no houses. That is abuse of our people, and it must come to an end. We must address these issues. And if we are to achieve inclusive growth, we must respond to the many ways in which Black South Africans are also excluded. At the heart of the inequality, poverty, and underdevelopment challenge that is so prevalent in our society was the dispossession of the black majority, Africans, coloreds, and Indians, of their assets. Their land was taken away from them, their homes, their livestock, their crops, their businesses, and in the end, their livelihoods were also taken away from them. Denied opportunities to acquire assets, the lives of millions of our people remain in limbo. They are precarious, with only poverty to pass from one generation to the next. Since the dawn of democracy, we've done much to address this asset poverty, for example, by building over 4 million houses for the poor since 1994. Now the country has turned its attention to land, with a renewed commitment from several quarters to accelerate land redistribution and restitution, and ensuring security of tenure, particularly for the poor and the vulnerable. This is essential, and this is precisely what former President Kgalema Motlanthe also found out when he was going through the length and the breadth of the country during the high-level panel investigations. It is essential because we need to address the injustices of the past with a view to reducing asset poverty. It is also essential for growth and development. The economic potential of land in South Africa has been severely constrained by the concentration of ownership and control of the assets of our country in the hands of a few. It is time that we should unlock these assets, and through that there will be great potential by giving arable land and agricultural support to emerging black farmers, and also households by providing labor tenants as well, with security of tenure, by housing poor families in well-located areas, and by ensuring that communal land is used for the benefit of communities. Asset ownership, security of tenure provides pathways out of poverty. It improves standards of living. It increases household savings as well as investment. It is also associated with improved educational outcomes and empowers poor people to become more assertive economic agents themselves. Significantly, it ensures that growth is more inclusive and more sustained and becomes economic growth that is pervasive and benefits all. Alongside the dispossession of land, the most heinous crime or act of the apartheid state was the deliberate denial to black South Africans of a decent education. The World Bank report cites this as one of the key issues, having cited land as well. The shortage of skills in our society remains the greatest impediment to inclusive growth. The development of our human capabilities is therefore absolutely essential. The last 24 years have seen many achievements in education, from the creation of a single non-racial education system to the achievement of almost universal enrollment in the early years of school, from a substantial expansion of enrollment in higher education to the recent growth of an early childhood development program. Yet, set against these achievements, there have been some intractable challenges that we face. The quality of education our children receive is far below the standards that we expect and need. Dropout rates in high schools and in institutions of higher learning are stubbornly high, reflecting the impact of poverty and social circumstance, as well as the lack of preparation for further study. While these challenges are being steadily addressed across the education and skill development system, progress is still very slow, and in a number of places it's uneven. It must be our ambition to move faster and to aim higher as well. This requires that policy be critically examined and resources more strategically directed. It requires that we provide young people with the skills needed for the workplace of tomorrow. I had occasion this morning to be in discussion with young people and to challenge them during Youth Month to come forward with their own proposals, their own suggestions, their own thoughts and views on what the nation can do for them, so that we do not do anything about them without them. And they promise me that they will take up the challenge. And we know that it may be years before we see the benefits of the improvements we now make in the education system. But we still need to have collaborations and discussions, and hopefully discussions that will involve young people themselves. It is therefore important that we capacitate the young people who are today looking for work through work experience initiatives, through in-service training and work readiness programs. The one issue that they have raised quite strongly is the fact that they're facing a lot of barriers with regard to finding jobs. And they say we now need to make a concerted effort to remove those barriers so that the pathways to finding jobs can be more open. The measures like the employment tax incentive may reduce the risks and the costs of employing first-time job seekers, but there is a clear need for a broad and multifaceted range of interventions to get young people into employment. And unless we develop the skills of our people, they will forever remain excluded from the productive economy, and the dream of a sustained growth will always remain elusive. An inclusive economy requires the fundamental reconfiguration of gender relations in South African society. Our economy will forever remain constrained if women are not given the opportunity to become full and equal participants in the economic life of our country. I very much enjoyed being at the G7 and listening to the Prime Minister of Canada speaking very passionately about the empowerment of young girls and women, and where he was able to corral the other members of the G7, save for the United States, to raise $3.8 billion, which is quite a lot of money for the empowerment of young girls and women in vulnerable societies. This is an important area of focus that we as South Africans should also be looking at. How we can come up with initiatives, new and fresh initiatives to empower young girls and women in our society, because they forever remain vulnerable. They are part of the vulnerable groups in our country, and we must empower our women and young girls. Now, the expectation that women should bear the greatest responsibility for childcare and domestic work consigns the women of our country to positions of economic and social subordination. From the earliest of days of life, we must work to ensure that the girl child has every opportunity that her male counterpart also has. We must ensure that she remains in school until matric and is given the space to excel in fields such as maths, science, and technology. And if we do that, we will find, pleasantly so, that these young girls are far better than their male counterparts, as women are far better than men anyway. We must make sure that this young girl can go on to an institution of higher learning or into post-school training, that she is able to equally compete for a job, to earn equal pay for equal work, and also to have the opportunity to be promoted according to her ability and contribution. If we achieve this, if we confront patriarchy in all its forms and talk about it in society, because it is only when we talk about it in society that we will be able to get rid of it. Gender equality is necessary to make the economy inclusive, but it is just as important to make the economy to grow as well. The challenges we face are indeed many. They are substantial, they are complex, and they are deeply embedded not only in our society, but in our past as well. And it is that past that continues. It continues to cast a shadow on the future that we should have. Yet, we should dare to dream. We should dare to be hopeful, because we have overcome so much, and we know our people are capable of overcoming much more, as they did in the past. We know that the desire of our people for peace, for prosperity and comfort is far stronger and more abiding than the inheritance of our shameful past. Working together in gatherings of this nature, where we will be able to come up with solutions, come up with ideas, thoughts, and proposals that can move us forward. This is where we must forge ahead to have and craft a shared vision of an inclusive South Africa. It is through gatherings like these, dialogues like these, that we should unite all South Africans behind a common program for fundamental change. It is through these discussions that we should dream. And the dream may seem to be outlandish at times, but dream we must, for it is only in unity and working together that we will be able to realize the dream of a South Africa that belongs to all who live in it, black and white, men and women, young and old. This South Africa that we're dreaming about, the South Africa that we want, the South Africa that we yearn for, is within our reach, as it was within the reach of our forebears when they drafted the Freedom Charter. They said then in 1955, and so can we say ourselves today in 2018, these freedoms that we dream of, we shall fight for, side by side, until we have won our meaningful freedom. Let us build the South Africa of our dreams, working together side by side. We've done a great deal in the past, and we can continue to do so. I look forward to hearing the dream that will emerge out of the peaks of the Drakensberg Mountains. Thank you very much.